Today, we're here to celebrate a beautiful woman created in the image of God, my beloved grandma, Frieda Ruth Jochner. My hope today is for those who knew and love this woman to smile and rejoice at the memories you've shared with her through the years, whether you called her mom, grandma, great-grandma, great-great-grandma, aunt, great-aunt, or friend. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words. The original slideshow had about 457,000 words, thanks to our recent 100th birthday blessing celebration. But I've whittled them down to about 15 minutes, dividing Frieda's life into 4 significant periods. And I'll share a little about each period now. We'll start with the early years. On September 28, 1922, Frieda Ruth, the 13th child of Sam and Maria Cannonwisher, was born in a small township near Velva, North Dakota. But she was not the last child in her family. In all, Frieda grew up among 16 brothers and sisters on a farm in North Dakota, where she milked cows, enjoyed the produce of the land, and learned many practical skills for life. I'll share a few memories I've heard that stand out in these growing up years. Ice skating. In the cold North Dakota winters, the river would freeze. Frieda and her friends would ice skate to school and back on the frozen water. The love for ice skating has carried over to our family, my daughter Emily, being born during the Winter Olympics in 1994 during the ice skating event. I'm still traumatized that everyone was more interested in watching Brian Boitano skate than helping me through my contractions. Grandma was a majorette. Absolutely gorgeous in her uniform and quite skilled with a baton. There's also a story about the rock quarry. One memory that would stick with Frieda till the end was the time her brothers threw her into the lake at the rock quarry. While she did forgive her brothers, she never could let go of the recurring pain in her neck from where she landed. Frieda lived through our history books. She was born during the Roaring Twenties, grew up during the Great Depression, and met her first true love during World War II, which brings us to the second period of her life, her first marriage. Frieda met her first husband, Harold Arthur Herr, in North Dakota, likely while serving him a tasty meal at the restaurant where she worked as a waitress. At the time, he was working at a nearby print shop. It was love at first flight. Harold was a pilot and took young Frieda up in an airplane and surprised her with a loop-de-loo. She didn't wet her pants like the last gal, and it sealed the deal. They were married on June 19, 1942 in California at Chico Army Flying School, where Harold was training to be a fighter pilot. At the height of World War II, Harold joined the 1st Fighter Group of the 94th Fighter Squadron of the U.S. Army Air Corps, which later became the U.S. Air Force. 1 week before their eldest daughter was born, Frieda received notice that Harold was missing in action. On August 5, 1943, on a return mission, Harold was attacked by enemy fighters and was forced to bail out of his fighter aircraft over the Mediterranean Sea, where he floated on an inflatable dinghy for 12 days before being rescued. Kathleen Marie Herr was born on October 3, 1943. Frieda raised her newborn daughter for 5 months before being reunited to her husband, who had barely survived the ordeal. And I'm so thankful he did survive. If my grandpa Harold had passed away at sea, I would not be here today. My mom, Marilyn Charlotte, Frieda's second daughter, would have never been born on February 28, 1945. And about 5 years later, Frieda's youngest, Linda Gale, was born. She was both a surprise and the baby of the family. Frieda and Harold enjoyed many marvelous memories together for the next 20 years after the birth of the last of their 3 children. Sadly, likely due to the harsh ordeal at sea, Harold passed away on September 20th, 1970 at the age of 54, leaving Frieda a young widow with 4 living grandchildren, Scott and Todd from Kathleen, and Brian and Michelle from Maryland. I was 8 months old when Grandpa Harold passed. I have many fond memories of my grandma during those years when I was very young and naive. Once, while watching me and my brother while my parents were out of town, we had missed the school bus, and I reported the tragic news to my grandma. She gave me that look and asked me if I was pulling her leg. I was very confused. I was at least 3 feet away from her. How could she possibly think I was pulling on her leg? Another time, when I was very young, we were driving in the car and I had to go to the bathroom really bad, and I made sure everyone knew. Finally, Grandma said, "I'm going to roll down the window and hang you over the side of the culvert so you can go." That dried me up real fast. Grandma also taught me a couple pieces of solid advice. Grandma told me, always keep an extra pair of underwear in the glove compartment in case you have an accident. For the life of me, I couldn't figure out how an extra pair of underwear would do any good in the event of an automobile accident. It took me years to figure that one out. Grandma also offered me some very good marriage advice. She had a couple boyfriends through the years. One was named Sherman. I really liked him, so I asked her if they were going to get married. She said, no, he's going to have to wash his own socks. That was profound advice to a maybe 7-year-old. After 9 years of widowhood, Frieda finally found a man whose socks were worthy of washing. He was also the love of her life, which brings us to part 3 of her story, her second marriage. On November 4th, 1979, Frieda married widower Robert Max Jochner, and 2 families merged. Robert added 3 more families to Frieda's 3. The children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, nieces, and nephews multiplied. This era of her life, to me, was marked by quilting, crocheting, cooking, caring, and kindness. She even taught me some of these skills, particularly crocheting. Frieda also had an exuberance for life, a tremendous love for traveling, and an incessant commitment to capturing memories through scrapbooks, photo albums, and videography. Those who enjoyed Frieda's gracious hospitality might have even been surprised by her sense of humor when they retired for the night and found that Frieda had short-sheeted their bed. And I would be amiss to not mention her love for golfing and the trophies that prove it, her delight in the Oakland A's and all the memorabilia to prove it, and the tailgate parties she enjoyed with her new family. No doubt, some of these activities were enjoyed prior to her second marriage, but my memory associates them with this time, likely due to my age. I was 9 when she remarried. I've heard enough stories to know she enjoyed many of these activities earlier in life. Kathleen can tell you the story about how she lost Frieda's first quilt. Other activities during this stage in life, like A's games and tailgate parties, came with the new family, and Grandma was all in. Frieda and Robert enjoyed many years together in San Leandro, California, and later in Antioch, where they eventually moved into a small cottage in Quail Village so Frieda didn't have to cook anymore. They still enjoyed traveling and golf, but with age, their health did decline over the years. Frieda was diagnosed with Alzheimer's dementia, and Robert suffered with heart issues. On December 3rd, 2009, Robert broke Frieda's heart and went home to be with his Lord. And just as Anne Murray sang, "Time won't heal a broken-hearted me," in the same way, Grandma's heart never healed from the loss of her beloved Robert, but time still moved on, which brings us to the last season of her life, her later years. After Robert passed away, Frieda could no longer live alone. She needed constant care. At first, the family took turns staying with her. Marilyn was there for Christmas, Emily and myself were there for New Year's, and other family filled in when needed. The memories I made with Grandma before and after the new year of 2010 will stay with me forever. My grandma was able to teach me a little bit about quilting, and she guided me as I put together pieces of a quilt that she could no longer work on. Years later, Kathleen had that quilt finished. Now it belongs to me, and it is a cherished treasure. Grandma also taught me a second lesson about marriage that New Year's season. She told me that marriage was a lot like dancing. All you have to do is follow your husband's lead. Everything else will take care of itself. Soon, the family packed up her belongings, and her grandson Todd transported it all to Kernville, where Frieda would live with her eldest daughter, Kathleen, for about a year. After that, she moved to Emeritus, an assisted living home in Bakersfield, from 2011 to 2014. It got hard for the family to drive to Bakersfield to visit Frieda, so they moved her to Kern Village on Burlando Road in Kernville. Marilyn was able to bring her fresh strawberries, blueberries, and chocolates and fix her hair for supper almost every day. And her daughter Kathleen would come several times a week to play gin rummy. From what I hear, Grandma always won, and her daughter Kathleen will attest to that. Plus, she got to enjoy many outings, family visits, birthday parties, shopping trips, Eggs Benedict at Cheryl's Diner, shrimp cocktail at Marilyn's, and many holiday celebrations with the family. She also outlived all the residents at Kern Village and earned the title of the best dressed woman in Kernville. She had some fantastic caregivers. But 2020 changed everything. No more family visits, no more fresh fruit daily, no card games, and Grandma steadily declined. After many family powwows, we all agreed that Tom and myself would take Grandma into our home to care for her in her last days. It took nearly 9 months to find a house suitable. On October 4th, 2021, Grandma moved into our home. My heart's desire was to bless her with all the fresh strawberries, blueberries, and avocados her heart desired. I discovered one of her favorite foods was bananas, and she'd eat 3 or 4 a day if I'd let her, and I usually did, though I did have to hide them from her because she just couldn't get enough. Oh, how I love my grandma. What a beautiful woman. But dementia is ugly, and there were certain behaviors that were difficult for me to navigate. My sweet, vivacious grandma was not the same woman I knew growing up, or even the same woman that I knew in short visits. Taking care of my grandma became a struggle I had not anticipated. Soon the honeymoon period was over, and eventually all familial love had vanished. She was just a woman with dementia who I promised that I'd take care of until death. But God. By God's design, I was studying the Beatitudes around that dark time in my life. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. I realized I could not love my grandma in my own strength. I didn't have it in me, but I did have all the resources of heaven at my disposal. So I came to God like a pauper or a beggar, poor in spirit, to ask him to love my grandma through me. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. I acknowledged my sinful thoughts and actions before God and asked him to change my heart, mourning over my sin. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Meekness is not weakness. I asked God to do whatever it took to tame the wild beast in my heart so I could serve my grandma from a heart of service to and love for Christ. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. I wanted to change. I was hungry for it. Whenever I failed, I confessed my sin yet again. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall be shown mercy. I couldn't even be merciful in my own strength. I didn't have it in me. I was a dried up lake. So I asked God to teach me how to be merciful to my grandma. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. I wanted to love my grandma from a sincere and genuine heart, not just in outward actions, but with joy. I needed a heart change. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Not only did I need to make peace in my own heart, I needed to be at peace with my grandma, no matter how she acted. This kind of love can only come from God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. The bookend to Beatitude number 1. As I fought the good fight to love my grandma for righteousness' sake and the power of the Spirit and for Christ's sake, I would receive not only a blessing on earth, but I would also store up rewards in heaven. I started to understand that the Beatitudes were Christianity 101, the way God desires his children to live, always. And I wanted it, but I realized there was nothing I could do in my own strength to get it. I had to start with Beatitude number 1. Blessed are the poor in spirit, then move to number 2 and mourn over my sin, and so on. I had already tried to love my grandma in my own strength and I couldn't do it. But what I couldn't do, Christ did in me and for me, simply because I asked God in faith. And he answered in the most marvelous way. I thought I was bringing my grandma into my home to bless her, but God had different plans. He wanted to bless me by teaching me how to love others in his strength and not my own. What he did for me often brings me to tears. It wasn't easy, and it didn't happen overnight or without many failures on my part. But in the last months of my grandma's life, the work of grace that God did in my heart was phenomenal. I no longer saw the dementia. I only saw a beautiful woman created in the image of God. I loved her more then than I had in all my growing up years. Only God can do a work like that. And I desperately wanted God to do a work like that in my grandma's life. During her time with me, Frieda struggled in her relationship with God. She was burdened by a guilty conscience and was fixated on the fact that she was going to hell. Why? She knew she was a sinner and didn't think she was good enough to go to heaven. I constantly reassured her that there was nothing that God could not forgive, and there was nothing she could do to be good enough to merit heaven. If there was anything she could do to earn her own salvation, Christ would not have had to die on the cross. All she had to do was trust in faith that Christ paid for her sins on the cross. Everyone who calls upon the name of the Lord will be saved. Just call on Jesus, Grandma. Only trust him. The day she died, the chaplain had come for a visit and told her the same message. It's by grace alone, Frieda, and Jesus is there waiting for you. For by grace you have been saved through faith, and that not of yourself. It is the gift of God, not of works, lest anyone should boast. On the night Grandma died, she could only communicate with her eyebrows, or so we imagined. We asked her if she was trusting Jesus. Her eyebrows raised 2 times in response. It was all we had, but it was enough. There's no need to wait until our dying breath to trust in Jesus. His arms are willing to accept us right now. Jesus said, "All that the Father gives me will come to him, and the one who comes to me I will by no means cast out." There is so much more I could share about the 53 years that I was blessed to know my grandma. This was just the tip of the iceberg, and I'm sure each one of you has memories of your own.